Greg Peck got an Oscar for his role in To Kill a Mockingbird, but he almost ruined the movie's most famous scene. In Southern theaters, police had to protect the 6-minute scene, and studio execs wanted it to be taken out. But Peck's worries were even worse. He wanted to tone down the movie's racist message because he thought it could split the country. The next thing that happened would change Hollywood for good. Greg Peck was born in La Jolla, California, on April 5, 1916. He didn't like that his full name was Eldred Gregory Peck. He joked that his mom got the name from a phone book, and he had to live with it. Gregory Pearl Peck was his father. He was an Irish chemist, and Bernice Ayres was his mother. She was from Scotland. His grandmother was related to Thomas Ashe, who was a key player in the 1916 Easter Rising. This gave him an interesting link to Irish history. This was the same year that Peck was born, which seemed like an odd mix-up. Peck had a rough childhood. His parents split up when he was 3 years old, and they got a divorce when he was 6. He had to go back and forth between his dad, mom, and grandma. It shook up his life, and he learned that lesson early on, to rely on himself. His parents sent him to St. John's Military Academy in Los Angeles when he was 10 years old because they thought it would help him stay stable. It made him feel alone instead. At some point, he said that he knew he had to watch out for himself when he was 15. He always had trouble with money when he was younger. As time went on, he moved to New York to follow his acting dreams. He was so poor that he would sometimes sleep in Central Park. He had money problems even earlier when he was in college at Berkeley. Even though it was only $26 a year, he still had a hard time paying for school. He worked as a kitchen helper at a sorority and washed dishes in exchange for food. Peck didn't set out to become an actor. It was 1935 when he started going to the University of California, Berkeley. He was there to become a doctor. But that changed when the school's little theater needed men to play parts. In a play called Moby Dick, the director asked him to play Captain Ahab. It was okay with Peck, even though he had never done this before. That year, he was in 5 more plays even though he wasn't very good. Experience made him love acting, and in a strange way, it led to his role as Captain Ahab in a movie many years later. At Berkeley, Peck was also on the rowing team, which later helped his image when Hollywood used it as a story to explain a back injury. The real injury happened in a dance class with Martha Graham, but the rowing story stuck and made him look even more impressive. In 1939, Peck dropped out of Berkeley with only 1 course left to finish. He thought he knew everything he needed to know and was ready to move on. Peck had only $160 in his pocket when he went to New York. He worked as a barker at the 1939 World's Fair and as a tour guide at Radio City Music Hall to make money. He posed for catalogs too. He changed things when he won a scholarship to the local theater and studied acting with Sanford Meisner. He also dropped the name Eldred around this time, which was the start of a new era in his work. Peck's first show on Broadway was The Morning Star in 1942. The play began during World War II, when he was 26 years old. Many Hollywood stars were away at the time, making Peck stand out as a new star. The movie companies were interested in him after his success on Broadway. Even though he failed his first screen test in 1941, big companies like 20th Century Fox, MGM, and RKO quickly became interested in him. His agent, Leland Hayward, got him a great deal that included top billing, script review, and a big first salary, even though no one knew who Peck was. The Keys of the Kingdom, 1944, Peck's second movie, was his big break. He had to show a lot of different feelings as the missionary priest Father Francis Chisholm aged over the course of several decades. The movie didn't do very well at the box office, but Peck's performance was praised by reviewers. In fact, he was only 28 years old when he got his first Oscar nod. The nomination made it clear that he was a real talent, even though he didn't win. Peck also got several movie deals with big studios because of this role. He became one of the most sought-after stars in his time. Greg Peck was nominated for 2 Oscars that year for this part. In 1946, a poor farmer named Ezra Penny Baxter tried to raise his son in the wilds of Florida. It was very hard to make the movie. Movies were shot in 1941, but had to be stopped because of issues with kid actors and the early Technicolor process. In 1945, shooting began again. This time, Peck plays the lead role. Peck put in a lot of work to make his role seem real. He talked to real Florida farmers for a while to get their accents and ways of acting just right. The emotional depth of the movie and his relationship with kid actor Claude Jarman Jr. were both praised. The next time Peck was nominated was for Gentleman's Agreement, which came out in 1947. At the time, this movie was very risky because it talked about racism in the United States. Peck played Philip Green, a reporter who pretended to be Jewish to show how hatred hurts people. Many companies didn't want to make movies with this kind of story, but Peck did it anyway, even though it might make some people angry. His performance showed the many overt and covert ways that racism showed up in America after World War II. Not only did the movie win Best Picture, but Peck also got Best Actor. His part in such an important movie made him even more well-known in Hollywood. It wasn't just difficult parts that Peck played at this time. He was also having problems in his personal life, like a failed first marriage and the stress of becoming famous all of a sudden. Even with these problems, he put on shows that showed how professional he was and how much he cared about his job. This part of his work showed how good and brave he was as an actor. Alfred Hitchcock and Peck worked together on the psychological film Spellbound. Both Peck and Hitchcock thought this movie was important. Peck, who was only 29, played Dr. Anthony Edwards in his fifth movie. Edwards is a guy who has lost his memory and may also be a killer. Peck had to show that she was both weak and dangerous in the part, which was hard. Peck had to give a complex performance because of the way Hitchcock directed. The movie also had a dream sequence that Salvador Dali created. Strange and interesting part of the movie. Peck later talked about Dali's strange behavior on set, like wanting to use real ants in a scene, which had to be switched out for chocolate sprinkles. It wasn't easy to make Spellbound. There were a lot of disagreements between David O., Selznick, and Hitchcock. Hitchcock didn't like it when Selznick brought in his own doctor as a consultant. Even with these problems, the movie was a huge hit, making over $6.4 million and getting nominated for 6 Academy Awards. Psychoanalysis was a new idea for many people at the time, and this movie exposed them to it, and even began with a warning that explained it. It wasn't known for decades that Peck and his co-star Ingrid Bergman were having an affair behind the scenes. Their relationship in real life made their chemistry on screen even better, which was one of the best things about the movie. In 1946, Peck played a part in Duel in the Sun that was very different from the ones he usually plays. He played Luke McCanley, a bad guy and crazy person who was very different from the good guys he usually plays. The movie Lust in the Dust was one of the most talked about movies of its time. The plot was about a love triangle between Lute, his brother, and a woman who is half Native American. With various directors and a huge $6 million budget, the production was a mess. It took almost a year to film, and censors and religious groups were against it. In some places, it was even illegal. Even so, the debate brought people to the movie, which made more than $20 million. Not all critics liked the part, but it showed how versatile Peck was as an actor who was willing to try new things. Peck helped to start the La Jolla Playhouse in California in 1947 with Mel Ferrer and Dorothy McGuire. Wanted to keep up with live theater, even though she worked in Hollywood. During the summer, the Playhouse gave Hollywood stars a chance to go back to their roots in theater. Peck played the lead role in Night Must Fall at the start of the first season. The Playhouse was known for putting on high-quality shows and having many famous actors play there. Peck was the artistic head until 1959, but the theater took a break because of money problems and his busy film career. Gregory Peck's big break came in 1949 with his part in 12 O'Clock High. During World War II, he played General Frank Savage, a man in charge of a group of bomber pilots. This part earned him his 4th Oscar nomination, which shows how quickly he became one of A-list Hollywood stars. The movie was very different from the ones he had made before. It wasn't just about war, but also about how people's minds were changed. Peck's character had to be tough when things got really tough, but the stress made him break down. People who saw the movie fell in love with him, and he fought against unfairness. He was great for these roles because of his deep voice and tall, strong build, but he wanted to try something new. In the 1950s, Peck said he was sick of always being the quiet, strong type. He wanted to do something different like a comedy show or a musical. Peck began to take chances. In 1954's Roman Holiday, Audrey Hepburn was in it. Even though the movie did well, not everyone thought he was funny. After that, he played darker parts like Captain Ahab in Moby Dick, 1956. He took some risks, but not all of them paid off. In 1959, he played F in the movie Beloved Infidel. Some people didn't like Scott Fitzgerald's work. After the fact, Peck said he might have been pushing himself too hard to show he could do something new. During the shooting of The Big Country, 1958, he lost it and got into a fight with the director. They even walked off the set. This showed how badly he wanted to stop being a certain type of person, even if it made things tense. It wasn't clear to Peck whether he should take the part of Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. He was worried about being played as a good guy again after going through a rough patch in his career. It was a touchy subject, but the story was about unfair treatment of black people. Back in the 1960s, Peck was not sure if the movie would make things worse, especially in the South. He also thought about whether the movie would be as good as the book, which a lot of people loved. Peck wrote in his diary, "Can we really do justice to this book? It's more than just a story. It's a part of the American spirit." Peck was also scared to play Atticus Finch. He was afraid of making the character seem too real because he thought the character was almost too perfect. He didn't want Atticus to think of himself as just an idea or a sign. He wanted him to feel like a person. But as Peck thought about it more, he saw that Atticus had a lot of the same values as him. Peck cared a lot about human rights and had been involved with the NAACP and the ACLU. He felt like playing Atticus Finch was a way to stand up for what he thought was right. Harper Lee, who wrote the book, told Peck that she got the idea for Atticus from her own father, who was a lawyer and a quiet hero. This really moved Peck, and he thought the part was a way to honor people who fought for justice. He finally played the part. Gregory Peck, he really got into it in March 1961. He read Harper Lee's book 17 times and made notes all over it each time. After that, he checked out how people talked and behaved in Alabama. He practiced every day for 3 months and won pages of it. He worked with a coach for hours to get the right Southern accent. He ate more because he thought Atticus should look a little bigger. Peck also got sideburns, and he didn't touch them while the movie was being made. He learned how to play the harp because he thought that was something Atticus would do to unwind. And it wasn't in the book. It's one of the sweetest parts of the movie that idea made it in. It wasn't easy to make the movie, though. It wasn't always easy for director Robert Mulligan and producer Alan J. Pakula to get along. Their disagreements about how the story should go went on for months as they talked about everything. People fought for 6 hours over Peck's plan to change the title of the movie because he didn't think To Kill a Mockingbird fit the plot. But they came up with ways to work together and make everyone clap for longer than 5 minutes. That time, renowned. After many years, it was ranked 13th on a list of the all-time best movie lines. It looked like Peck had no trouble with the part, but he really did. Deep racial unfairness was the subject of the speech, and Peck had a hard time making it feel real. As a white man, it wasn't easy for him to play a figure who had to deal with racism. Best Actor was given to Peck for his part as Atticus Finch in April 1963. He was nominated, but this was his first win. He talked about real injustice in his acceptance speech, which was very powerful during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. It came out just a few months after a big event at the University of Mississippi turned violent because of racial problems. The time of day made the story seem even more important. Later, the American Film Institute, AFI, said that Atticus Finch was the best movie hero of the 20th century. The movie was also chosen by the AFI as one of the best American movies ever. These awards show how much the movie and Peck's acting have meant to people over the years. There were, however, some who didn't like the movie or Peck's part over time. Movies like The Guns of Navarone and Cape Fear have made people criticize the 1960s. The Guns of Navarone, which came out in 1961, was the biggest hit of the year, making $28.9 million at the box office. Peck played Captain Keith Mallory in the movie. Mallory was a skilled mountain climber who was in charge of a risky mission to destroy German artillery. He played the part with a lot of depth and passion, which made people love it. The movie was so popular that it led to a follow-up called Force 10, from Navarone, which came out in 1978, 17 years later. Right after this hit, in 1962, Peck appeared in Cape Fear. The dark and scary story in this movie shocked a lot of people. Peck played Sam Bowden, a lawyer who was being scared by a psychopath criminal. Robert Mitchum played Max Cady. At that time, the movie was very brave for dealing with scary topics like mental abuse and violence that was only hinted at. Some reviewers didn't like the movie at first, but it became a classic thriller over time. Peck's part showed a different side of him. The movie, which was vulnerable and complicated, became so famous that Martin Scorsese made a new version of it in 1991. As an homage to the first movie, Peck had a small part in the new version. It's hard to believe that Peck was in Guns of Navarone, Cape Fear, and To Kill a Mockingbird all in a short amount of time. Peck played Atticus Finch, a lawyer who fights for justice and freedom, in To Kill a Mockingbird, which came out the same year. People think this is one of his best performances. He also presented a documentary called The Trial of the Catonsville Nine. The movie was about 9 Catholic activists who burned draft files to protest President Richard Nixon, who put them on his so-called enemy list in 1973. Nixon saw some of these people as danger to his government. Peck thought this was funny, and he would joke that his only regret was not being higher on the list, even though there were risks. Joseph Mengele, a Nazi doctor in The Boys from Brazil. The movie was about Mengel's plan to make a copy of Adolf Hitler and start a new Reich. This was very different from Peck's usual heroic roles, and a lot of people were shocked that he agreed to play such a controversial part. Peck spent months getting ready, learning Mengel's habits, and even putting on a thick German accent. He was so dedicated that he had bad dreams while shooting. People had different feelings about the movie, but they praised Peck's bravery for playing such a difficult part. Gregory Peck got the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1969, which is one of the highest honors in the United States. At the White House, President Lyndon B. Johnson gave him the award to honor his work in movies and to make the world a better place. Johnson praised Peck for giving acting respect and picking roles that brought up important social problems, such as To Kill a Mockingbird. On and off the screen, Peck made a moving speech at the event about peace and civil rights. Peck's medal made him one of only 20 people to receive the honor from Johnson. Other famous people who have gotten the honor are Walt Disney and Helen Keller. In his life, Gregory Peck was married twice, and each one changed him in its own way. Greta Kukkonen was his first wife. They got married in 1942, when he was 26 years old and still building his career in Hollywood. They had 3 boys, Jonathan in 1944, Stephen in 1946, and Carrie Paul in 1949. In spite of this, Peck found it harder to balance his work and home life as his fame grew. They were married for 13 years before getting a divorce on December 30th, 1955. Due to the stress of his work and home life, this was a major turning point for Peck. After only 1 month, Peck got married again. He married Veronique Passani, a writer from Paris, on January 31st, 1956. They met for the first time in 1952, when Peck was in Europe promoting his movie American Holiday. They felt a strong bond right away, and they quickly began living together. Antony was born in 1956, and Cecilia was born in 1958. His second marriage was very different from the first. His first marriage had trouble because of his fame, but his second marriage lasted for years, until Peck's death in 2003. He felt very close to Veronique, who was always there for him, both in his public and private life. She was with him at premieres and on film sets. It was important to Peck to be a good dad, even though his job kept him busy. He found ways to spend time with his kids by taking them to movie sets and on trips whenever he could. As he got older, he loved spending time with his grandkids the most. Greg was proud of Ethan Peck, who followed Gregory's lead and became an actor. This was true through all of Gregory's ups and downs. Peck always cared deeply about his family. Even though being a Hollywood star was hard, he loved his family very much and put them first in everything he did.